The 2026 midterms will be one of the first real tests of just how influential this constituency has become. So the question for today's discussion is simple. Has crypto become a durable political force in American elections? And to help us answer all of that, I'm joined by three people who spend every day at the intersection of campaigns, policy, and public affairs. And if we could please go down and introduce yourselves and share what firms are you with.
Yeah, Rebecca Shaw with Avoq based in Washington, D.C., and my background is on Capitol Hill.
Zach Koutsky, native Chicagoan, and this is what it's always like, so come back in January and February. And I'm a partner at Mercury Public Affairs based here, but have a previous long-standing career in Democratic politics.
Jessica Taylor, I'm the Senate and Governor's Editor with the Cook Political Report with Amy Walter, and I'm based in Washington, D.C.
And Jessica, to start with you, you've covered competitive Senate races across the country. What changed most in how campaigns view crypto voters compared to past years?
I think that just the sheer amount of money that crypto groups are willing to spend in both primaries and in general election campaigns have made them such a force to be reckoned with, that it can kill hopes in a general election, as it did with Sherrod Brown's campaign 2 years ago. He's running again in one of the most competitive Senate races in the country that could help decide control of the Senate. You saw spending against a candidate like Katie Porter that in the Senate race in California in 2024, and I think that contributed to killing her general election hopes in the governor's race, among other reasons. But, you know, and then I am just struck by even, listen, this has to be a bipartisan issue, I think crypto does. And, you know, the spending to elect candidates in Georgia and Texas like Christian Menifee, I think I see it as a generational issue. And I think as both parties look to move on to younger candidates, that it is a more salient issue. I mean, Harris poll saw that, you know, an increase in candidates, you know, voters who see it as a major issue, 20% in 24, and it's doubled in just 2 years. So I think that, you know, overwhelmingly voters see it as a privacy issue, as wanting to create some sort of framework. You know, I still think it's the driving issues this election cycle are affordability and gas prices and what's happening in the Middle East and how that's affecting the economy. But for a party, for Democrats, especially as a party that need to win back younger voters and particularly younger male voters, I think it's an issue that the Democratic Party, I mean, Kirsten Gillibrand, one of the champions, is leading the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. You have Tim Scott, head of the Banking Committee, leading the National Republican Senatorial Committee. I think that candidates have to view it as an issue that they have to take a stand on. And I think just again, just the spending that we've seen already in House races, I think it's going to play a role in Michigan Senate races and Minnesota Senate primaries coming up as well.
Rebecca, any other shifts that you want to highlight that you're seeing today?
Yeah, I think that campaigns were looking at this issue previously as kind of a niche Silicon Valley issue, as a conversation about tech. And now, excuse me, the coalition is broader. They're looking at the donor network, of course, but they're also looking at it as far as retail investors, hobby investors, really capital formation in general. It's just a broader issue now for campaigns with a broader coalition than it was, you know, even a couple years ago.
Okay. Zach, recent polling shows most crypto owners don't consistently vote for one party, and nearly a third remain persuadable in key Senate races. High level, from a political strategy perspective, how significant is that?
I mean, it's significant. There's no question about it. Obviously, there's a lot of overlap, typically with coming into a midterm, more unlikely voters when it comes to not voting in a presidential year. So anytime that a campaign would be able to highlight commonality, understanding, even just like the cultural aspect of the crypto world, the crypto vote, and being able to make that connection with the voter that might not be your typical midterm voter would be a huge boon to any campaign that can do it. So I think you're going to see a lot of folks, a lot of candidates, campaigns doing that. Not, I don't think, to Jessica's point earlier, centering their campaign on that at all, I would advise them not to. But I think it's a significant tell. It's an acknowledgement of we're an increasing block of voters and hobbyists, investors, what have you, are at, and so you as a campaign have to meet voters where they're at. And I think because they're not tethered clearly to one political party or another, nor is really the industry and their spend, they've clearly shown willingness to spend on both and against, certainly against Dem and Republican candidates. It's an up for grabs issue, it's an up for grabs constituency, and certainly a political player on that. And I think any campaign would be smart to truly be who they are in that space and put yourself out there for it.
Jessica, any other battleground states that you're looking at? We were catching up over at the speaker lounge. Mike Lawler, Richie Torres, any other battleground sort of races that you're looking at?
Yeah, Lawler is one of the most competitive House races in the country, and one that will, I still think Democrats, even with the redistricting wars that have gone on, I think Republicans are set to pick up about 6 seats in our estimate from that. So Democrats are still a favorite to win the House. They're no longer an overwhelming favorite. But that race, I think we are clearly watching, when we have the New York primary elections that are happening next week, so we'll know who his opponent is, probably either Beth Davidson or Kate Connolly in that House race. I just go back to Ohio, that is so central. Richie Torres is in a safe seat right now. In New York, certainly. Again, I think it's just a different generation of candidates that we're looking at. I am really watching closely the Minnesota Senate primary that's happening in August, because that's another line where there's a very clear delineation on crypto policy between Peggy Flanagan, that has an F rating with Stand With Crypto, versus Angie Craig, that has an A rating. I think Flanagan is the favorite right now in that race, but I'm watching certainly the spending and how that comes in, because there is a lot of spending coming in for Craig, and how those TV ads, I think there's a good chance that Angie Craig is a senator either way, honestly, because Amy Klobuchar is going to be vacating. She's the favorite to win the open gubernatorial seat, so there's a chance that Klobuchar could appoint Craig there. So that could be an interesting dynamic if you have one senator who would be replacing Tina Smith that also has an F rating with Stand With Crypto, with a more pro-crypto candidate in Angie Craig. So I'm watching that. Could the industry get involved in the Michigan Senate race is another place I'm watching. I think that Haley Stevens is someone with a strong record on crypto issues as well. So those are some of the key races I'm watching. And I think there's certainly played a role in very close Senate races in Michigan last time with Alyssa Slotkin, Ruben Gallego. I think spending, was about $10 million in both of those races. But again, I go back to that $40 million in Sherrod Brown's race. I've certainly heard concern among Republicans about the type of campaign that John Husted is running. And, you had a candidate like Bernie Moreno that was such a blockchain advocate that I think was certainly knew the industry so well. I think that we are obviously already seeing money earmarked for that race and going after Sherrod Brown. And I think that has the potential to be one of the most expensive races in the country, probably breaking records from last time again. I think it's going to be a very, very close race. It's an R+11 seat. So, in this type of midterm environment, Sherrod Brown, with his overperformance, absolutely has a chance with the political environment. But I think that some of the attacks that crypto leveled against him last time are still dragging down his favorability rating on the economy in particular.
And Rebecca, you talk to lawmakers, regulators, industry leaders every day. What are elected officials hearing most often from crypto voters right now?
Yeah, I think the first thing they're hearing, Zach touched on, is a desire for bipartisanship. Most of America still lives somewhere in the middle. And it's not what we hear about every day, but most of America does still live in the middle, and they're looking for solutions from the middle, and particularly in the tight margins that we have now in Congress that requires bipartisanship. So I think that's the first thing they're looking for. But policy-wise, voters, constituents, they're not talking to their representatives about the price of Bitcoin. It's not a bunch of speculators going to their member and talking about Bitcoin prices. They're going and they're talking about innovation. They're talking about jobs. They're talking about whether or not the United States is going to be left behind in this global race for the seat of financial government, I guess, to some extent. And so that's what policymakers are hearing. And I think that's really important because, again, it's a shift from a couple years ago. We were talking about this niche tech issue out of Silicon Valley, and now voters, constituents across the country all have their own crypto story to tell, whether it's that they want their state to be the head of innovation, or they want their job to be protected, or they want their business to be able to grow. They've just reframed the conversation.
I would put into it, though, too, I mean, I think, Chuck Schumer always likes to coin kind of, a catch-all phrase of what an election is going to be defined as. I think it's chaos, corruption, and cruelty or something, this go around. And so I do want to acknowledge, too, that, I mean, because of Trump and his family's embrace of the Trump coin, and, they read out an advertisement during the cage match on the South Lawn on Sunday around it, I do think that there are going to be some persuadable voters and probably even a fair amount of crypto, supporters that are going to look towards that perceived conflict of interest and/or, I would argue, outright corruption that the president is engaging in, as also, something that could be worked into an overall message as well. And so it'll be interesting to see, is that going to be one of the central, points that they're saying, that opponents may even say we need to rein in, or are they going to try and moderate that and say, clearly it's been adopted by millions of you, the president himself, so I need to, kind of meet you where you're at. But I do think that there's going to be some overlap with the overall corruption, just because the president is so, and his sons are so overwhelmingly excited about it and, enthusiastic about their own offerings we're in.
Thank you. And then I would say, Rebecca, to double click on why regulatory clarity is winning, one of the strongest themes we've seen is that voters overwhelmingly want sort of clear rules, rules off the road. So why has regulatory clarity become such a politically effective message?
Yeah, because just to come back to it, because now regulatory clarity is an economic competitiveness message. Most businesses can exist, they can find a way to exist in any regulatory framework as long as the regulatory framework is clear and as long as there's some consistency to it. We've really seen neither of those things in this environment, particularly the consistency. Jessica could talk about it, I'm sure, all day, but the wild swings we see in House and Senate control, in the administration, and therefore in the regulators who are making these decisions, it provides no consistency. And so that fuels a lot of frustration, and it ultimately brings this conversation back to how can we compete and how can this industry succeed and innovate if we don't have this clear regulatory framework. And I think that's not a new conversation to lawmakers. They understand that. They don't have to understand the technology. It's better for us if they do know how crypto works, but they don't need to understand how the technology works to understand the economic competitiveness debate that's going on. It looks really similar to the debate that was had around the internet, around fintech, just around capital formation in general. And so, again, it's the same conversation. It's an old debate on a new topic, and lawmakers understand that.
And Zach, when it comes to messaging, how are campaigns thinking about how to form that messaging around either innovation versus regulation?
I mean, again, speaking from a democratic perspective, we like to regulate things. And I think, to Becca's point here, businesses aren't reflexively against it. I think, I saw the debate play out here in Illinois in Springfield, and you see it time and time again where a new technology, a new industry emerges, and there's a big group that always says, leave us alone, let us, kind of figure it out. And bad actors will show themselves, either punished by the market or otherwise. But there's always a core component that realizes, it's good to be seen as legitimate and regulated in that regard. It gives consumer confidence. It gives regulator and oversight confidence to that. And so I think you're going to find a balance, and I think it'll be smart for a candidate to say, so many of you are invested in this right now. Let's make sure that there are some rules to the road that we all understand, and that bad actors are pushed out. There is some consumer protection, and I think that's a wildly comfortable place for many people to be in on that. And frankly, you're seeing a lot of states move in that direction while the feds are still trying to figure it out.
And I would say one of the most interesting developments is that engagement didn't slow down after legislative wins. Since the Genius Act, more numbers, nearly 700 new advocates joined specifically the Stand With Crypto movement. We've had over 700,000 additional lawmaker contacts being generated. Obviously, this suggests that the movement is not disappearing after just a single policy win. So, Rebecca, where do you see biggest opportunities for bipartisan progress?
The next opportunity and the biggest opportunity right now is with the Clarity Act, with market structure legislation. The House, I know that Congressman Johnson was up here before, so I'm sure he touched on it, but the House has done their part. I'm a House mouse. The House has done their part, and the Senate, their next opportunity is to pass market structure legislation so that we can have the clarity around the rules of the road. There are some philosophical differences for sure between parties on what that will look like. And you guys know this already, but really both parties have agreed that it's time to make some clear rules of the road and to have a framework. So I think that's the next opportunity. I think something else just to think about in that context is in a representative democracy, Congressman Johnson, Senator Schumer, they are all representatives of their state or a small part of their state, and ultimately states are having these same conversations, and they are all aggressively fighting for builders, for the innovation and the capital to come to their states, and so Congress is just kind of all of those microcosms happening in one place, and so just as much as some of these members of Congress and these senators are fighting for stuff at the federal level, they want to help position their states to be winners at the end of this. And I think also we'll see that play out. A lot of states that you think of trying to attract investment, Wyoming, Texas, Ohio, New York, obviously, Florida, and some of those states have really competitive races. So you're going to see turnout and enthusiasm gaps there driven by the industry.
Yeah, I mean, Texas is going to be a really crucial Senate race. I'm already seeing this issue play out in governor's races too, fellowship package spending and a lot of gubernatorial races already. I mean, I'm watching South Carolina race, that's the runoff next week there, where they've backed Alan Wilson. I mean, I'm certainly watching in how, when it comes up in these state capitals, I mean, often state legislative races get overshadowed by the larger national picture, even in midterms years. But there's chambers that could flip in states across the country, and I think we're going to see states that want to address this as well, especially if the federal government does not have rules in that regard. I mean, it's hard to get anything done in an election year, so I think we're certainly coming down to the wire in that regard. But I don't think it's just federal races that I'm watching. It's a lot of state and state legislative races and how this affects things too.
And I would point, it's 2026 and beyond. So I don't think that we should sleep on the fact too that people that are going to be running for president, particularly governors, and some senators have, or I would say probably all senators, I guess, but have dealt with this, right? And you will see that probably play out in their own individual primaries going forward on that. They're going to have a record, states, particularly on the Democratic side, Illinois among them, that have dealt with this and came against the industry. Notably, Governor Pritzker's handpicked lieutenant governor, $10 million spent against Juliana Stratton in the primary. She won. She will be the next U.S. Senator here. But it was no surprise then in the end of the session this year that there was a crypto tax for the first time in the state on that, right? There is a willingness, I think, from some, particularly in the Democratic side, to say, we're, again, willing to regulate, and that's a record that they want to carry forward.
And as we look towards November 2026, let's do a quick lightning round. Let's start, Jessica. What's one thing political reporters may be underestimating about crypto voters heading into 2026?
I mean, I think that younger voters are such infrequent voters, particularly in midterm elections, but I think that this is really a place to get younger voters engaged. I think just as, I think older, myself included, I think that it's a technology and an innovation that you sort of have to wrap your head around, but it's one that isn't going away. And so I just go back to, I think that it's an issue that I only see growing as a potency to drive people to the polls.
Yeah, I would love to just piggyback on that. Younger voters, they don't differentiate between technology and finances in a way that older lawmakers do. Those issues are intertwined. And so as Jessica mentioned, this is going to be an affordability and an economic opportunity election. And in that regard, crypto is hand in hand for younger voters. Again, they don't differentiate. So I would just say my kind of lightning round answer is that I think lawmakers look at crypto through a lens of risk, and voters, particularly younger voters, look at crypto through the lens of opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And Zach, what's one thing campaigns still misunderstand about crypto voters?
I think one, the level of motivation that they bring, speaking to this issue, certainly with knowledge or at least comfort or a minimum understanding that it exists, can again be a big tell, can be a big signal to someone that might otherwise, again, be very indifferent, might be that very infrequent voter. And I think in a lot of these, Senate races in particular, right? I mean, I think I looked, Trump won 25 states 3 times, right? So that gets you to 50 in the Senate, right? Plus a vice president, you've got a majority. And Dems are going to have to push pretty far into that map. In states he won by double digits 3 times.
They're going to have to win at least 2 states that Trump won by double digits if you assume that North Carolina and Maine flip, which is Maine is not a certainty any longer for reasons that don't have anything to do with crypto. But, Democrats might need 3 to 4 double-digit Trump states. I mean, if the environment continues to deteriorate for Republicans, it's doable, but it's not easy by any means. So
I think you're going to be looking for any constituency, anywhere you can begin to carve out, show relevancy to, show understanding of, and again, you're just meeting a voter where they're at, and knowing that there are tens of millions that are invested in this, that are, in some cases, their livelihood, even tangentially, right? They're involved in the data center build out. They're, supplying, fiber optic cables, whatever it's going to be, they're now finding employment, they're finding opportunity in that. And so to not go forward and just say we're going to, cut it off at the knees a la Elizabeth Warren, but that it's here. Again, I think we need to regulate this. I think we need to put rules of the road for everyone to understand as we would with any other financial instrument, but that it's here to stay. So let's celebrate that. Let's, again, try and kind of play that innovation contest. Is something that a lot of candidates are going to do. And again, particularly in these states where Dems are going to have to push really far into, frankly, Trump voters, they're going to have to show commonality in that, and this can certainly be one of them, particularly for infrequent younger voters in that regard.
And as we conclude this panel, this question is open to all of you. Fast forward to November 2026. What's one headline you would not be surprised to read the morning after the election regarding crypto voters?
I think it's how the spending has influenced some of these races. Like I said, looking at Ohio, what other races crypto influence groups spend in. We're looking at also a knockdown of rules of coordination where Democrats' money advantage isn't going to matter as much as it did in previous elections. So I think that super PAC spending when it comes to crypto influence is going to be magnified this election cycle.
Yeah, as an Ohioan, I don't know what the headline will be. It'll be determined by the outcome of the race, but I can nearly guarantee that November 4th or soon after, there will be a headline related to crypto and the Ohio Senate race. The stories write themselves. The former Senate banking chairman who was knocked off in 2024 after surviving countless re-elections in a red state, certainly due in part to all of the crypto spend against him. How he fares in his comeback attempt will obviously be tied in some way to crypto advocacy.
Yeah.
And I would throw, just because I think of the spending power from crypto that has clearly already been demonstrated, I think they're going to be in a unique position to push further into the map where really if there is a wave building, which I believe there is, it certainly will be in some cases hitting a breakwater because of redistricting, where there's going to be some unique races that just naturally by triage will be overlooked by the party committees, will be overlooked by the procrastinators there, that a well-financed industry pack can go in and really have the playing field to themselves. And I think there could be some unique opportunities, particularly in the House, in that kind of tier 2, lean Dem, lean Republican seat, designation, that you could see some real surprises just because they might be the largest player in that district in a media market that's not anywhere near as saturated with voters that are not being harassed as much as campaign professionals require of them. And so because of that, the industry will be able to really kind of pick and choose some allies or some enemies that they're going to elect or punish.
Well, and I think too, we've seen such a decrease in competitive seats, and that's as a result of redistricting. But where I think crypto has the most influence is in some of these safe seat primaries for both Republican and Democratic groups. So that's getting people who are favorable to their interests, and where you can go in and you can have a member that is going to be there for a very long time.
Thank you, guys. And I would say in closing, crypto has always been an underdog story. A story of builders, innovators, entrepreneurs, investors, and everyday Americans working to create something new. But it's also become a grassroots story. Obviously, in just 2 years, we've seen a community grow specifically to stand with crypto, more than 3 million advocates across all 50 states. People are showing up, organizing, educating themselves, and making their voices heard. Regardless of where you stand on any political, individual policy proposal, that's one remarkable example of civic engagement. The question is no longer whether crypto has a seat at the table. The question is how much influence this community will have in shaping the future of innovation, finance, and public policy in America. And speaking about passionate communities, as a proud New Yorker, I want to give a big shout out to the New York Knicks on taking the championship home. Obviously, it's their first championship in more than 50 years. Outside of that, I want to give another big shout out to Jessica. It is her birthday today. Thank you so much for spending your birthday with us. Appreciate it. And with that said, thank you, Solana Policy Institute, for the invitation. All this programming, I think it's healthy, it's needed for the market, and it's needed for everyone that's here today. Thank you so much.